So there you have Prime Minister Narendra Modi taking an aerial survey of areas affected by Cyclone Tauktae. Remember, this also has been our focus, as the Prime Minister is now taking an aerial survey. He is, of course, personally monitoring the situation. He's proceeding for an aerial survey, as you can see on your television screens, of several areas like Una, Diu, Jafarabad and Mahua as well. Our senior executive editor Abhishek Kapoor once again with us to really take us through more details as and when he's picking up more information on the same. Abhishek, first visuals of Prime Minister taking an aerial survey. Possibly after this he will also be holding meetings with state officials along with the Chief Minister in Ahmedabad. What more can you tell us?
Well, yes, Catherine. So the pictures show Prime Minister doing the aerial survey, looking down at the affected areas and comparing notes with certain maps and in fact a digital notebook that he has so that he can see for himself the extent of damage caused by cyclone Tauktae in Gujarat yesterday, which bore the maximum brunt of the cyclone head-on as it made its landfall day before last night. So I think I can see in the pictures some coastal area which the Prime Minister is surveying. Also can be seen in the pictures is Chief Minister Vijay Rupani and I believe Secretary, Additional Chief Secretary, I believe Pankaj Kumar, who was Secretary to Prime Minister when he was Chief Minister of the state and now holds, I think, the Additional Chief Secretary in the Chief Minister's office. I think he's in the Revenue Administration, so he's giving a briefing to the Prime Minister on the map as also on the digital notebook. And as I said, this seems to be some coastal area in Saurashtra which the Prime Minister is surveying. The most affected areas, of course, have been in Saurashtra, the districts of Junagadh, Rajkot, Gir Somnath, Dwarka. And after this aerial survey, of course, Prime Minister would be traveling or heading to Ahmedabad, where he would be having a full-fledged review meeting in terms of ground reports about the extent of damage, both in life and property, and then assess for himself what needs to be done to make sure that Gujarat comes out of all this loss in the soonest possible time by way of whatever center help that is needed. As I said, there is of course this element of this being Prime Minister's home state, but Prime Minister does that with every other state that faces any natural calamity. You saw it at the time of Cyclone Amphan in Odisha and Bengal, and now of course in Gujarat. So he began his assessment after landing in Bhavnagar, where he was received by Chief Minister Rupani, and then he has flown straight for an aerial survey in Saurashtra region, from where he will straight head to Ahmedabad and do this review that I was just explaining.
Absolutely. Abhishek, as we speak, these are the live visuals we're picking up. So we continue staying with these visuals. That's what we'll do. We'll stay with these visuals and perhaps try and understand more on what we can expect. Like you said, during Amphan as well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited both West Bengal and Odisha, and once again personally reviewing the situation on ground in Gujarat as well. Abhishek, this has been the worst hit state. Maharashtra also has seen after effects of a cyclone, but given that the death toll is also climbing, given the ground situation of how we're seeing trees uprooted across, we're seeing buildings that have collapsed in large numbers, what really does the ground situation as of now looks like? Priyanka, our colleague who's been reporting from ground, has been saying the situation is relatively better from yesterday. And what is it that perhaps Prime Minister could be making sure happens next to bring the situation under control as soon as possible?
Well, Catherine, the cyclone began down south along the coast of Kerala, intensified into a super cyclone and moved northwards. But we have seen it has skirted most of the states in terms of, the severity of impact. There have been winds and gales and, the consequent impact by way of strong rains and whatever damage that would have led to. But then the real brunt was taken by Gujarat, and that's why Prime Minister has travelled there. We have seen how he gets involved in terms of managing whenever there is some calamity. We have seen, in fact, how he has been involved state-wise, even district-wise, as we saw yesterday, in terms of COVID management. And remember Cyclone Tauktae that has hit Gujarat day before yesterday night. It was, in fact, one of the severest in terms of intensity of the storms over the last 2 decades. This is how the Prime Minister deals with it. On 15 May, for example, when the cyclone was still away from the Indian coast, PM had chaired a high-level meeting of the National Disaster Management Authority. We saw how he spoke to each and every chief minister of the states that were going to be affected, including Kerala and Maharashtra, and of course the urgency with which the entire disaster management machinery was put in place, including mobilizing the forces. Be it the floods of 2014 in Jammu and Kashmir, where Prime Minister himself flew down and visited the affected areas, and twice, in fact, he visited the affected areas in Jammu and Kashmir in 2016. For example, if there was this Pottingal fire temple tragedy in Kerala in 2016, Prime Minister rushed to Kerala to assess the situation. He just takes that extra pain to travel and make sure that the disaster machinery is working, is in place, that there is no laxity of administration. So we have seen it happening innumerable number of times. In the midst of 2019 Lok Sabha election, for example, there was Cyclone Fani in Odisha, and Prime Minister reviewed the damage, traveled to Puri and chaired a review meeting with GM Patnaik at that time in Bhubaneswar as well. So it's not that because Gujarat is his home state, so he has traveled there. Of course, there would be that extra bit of attachment, but then as Prime Minister, he has been traveling to most disaster-affected areas, from the floods in Jammu and Kashmir to cyclone in Odisha and Bengal to the temple fire tragedy in Kerala, as I explained. Having said that, in the pictures you see Prime Minister having a digital notebook in his hands, looking at live maps of what all damage has been caused. And in fact, remember, the cyclone, the after effects of cyclone still continue to be felt. In many parts of Gujarat, it's still raining heavily. In fact, the cyclone has had some weather effect in northern parts of the country, including Delhi as well. It has been raining in Delhi NCR. This is obviously connected with the effect of the cyclone or after its after effects. So extensive damage in the affected state and the affected areas. Prime Minister assessing it, based on which he would obviously be deciding what more needs to be done by way of centers assistance, as also to make sure that since he is directly involved, the disaster machinery is working full time to get the states, including Gujarat, on their feet in the soonest possible time.
And these are the live visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi being briefed, Abhishek. This happened on Monday night. Tauktae made landfall between 8 p.m. To 11 a.m. near Una in neighboring Gir Somnath district. The wind starting gusting up to 185 km per hour. Rescue and relief operations have been on since then. In fact, just yesterday, the Deputy Chief of the Indian Navy also said that these have been the most difficult rescue operations that they've witnessed in the past 2 decades at least. So a lot of challenges that we're looking at as of now. The Prime Minister certainly being briefed there. But Abhishek, an important aspect can perhaps also be how experts have been pointing out the Arabian Sea has been looking at increased cyclonic activity very recently. 3 consecutive years we've been seeing that now. So perhaps the Prime Minister could also lay emphasis on how the states on the western coastline can be better prepared for such calamities in the future.
Well, Christian, absolutely. So, he has been Chief Minister of Gujarat for the longest possible time. He has seen for himself the frequency, intensity of cyclones, and yet this was a special one in terms of how severe it was, almost once in a 2-decade kind of affair. About whether Arabian Sea has become more active, that could be a subject of study under the climate change domain, and Prime Minister is someone who has been very actively involved on that front also, having taken the lead in setting up a climate change department in Gujarat way back in 2006, I remember. In fact, Gujarat was the first government anywhere in Asia to be setting up a department of that kind. So whether this is because of climate changes or just that Arabian Sea is kind of has started copying its more tempestuous sister, the Bay of Bengal, in terms of cyclonic activity. What is important is that as of now, you have to focus on relief and measures that limit the damage. And all the pictures suggest that we have seen since yesterday that insofar as damage to property is concerned, both public and private, the damage has been extensive. It would need some amount of rebuilding. It would need some amount of hand-holding. And for how long? So I think that's why Prime Minister is assessing. And as I was explaining, this is not just about Gujarat because that's his home state, but then he has done that from the time of Jammu and Kashmir floods in 2014, where in fact he traveled twice to the state to make sure that whatever relief and assistance was announced by the center was also implemented and transferred to the state government. And then we have seen how he involved himself in the midst of 2019 general elections with the relief effort in Odisha of Cyclone Fani, or after that of Cyclone Ampan, both in Bengal and Odisha. In fact, we remember that picture where Prime Minister made the announcement of center's relief in the presence of both Chief Ministers Mamata Banerjee and Naveen Patnaik, projecting a picture of Team India and cooperative federalism, as he believes from his own experiences as Chief Minister in Gujarat. So that bit continues, and hopefully by the time this exercise is over, he would come back and possibly today itself make some announcement as to what all the center would do or needs to be done in terms of center-state coordination to make sure that whatever damage has happened in Gujarat because of Cyclone Tauktae is limited, is controlled, and Gujarat brought back on its feet. Not that Gujarat suffers or has suffered a lot, because essentially over the last 2 decades, also during the time of Narendra Modi, in fact, his baptism was happened with the relief efforts of the Kutch earthquake in 2001. That was one reason why he was sent as Chief Minister of Gujarat in that period to make sure that disaster management is improved. So Gujarat has had some experience of disaster management, and that makes it one of the better states insofar as dealing with these kind of natural calamities is concerned. And still, you have a Prime Minister who has a certain set drill in terms of getting involved when it comes to making sure that so far as government's part is concerned, nothing is left to chance, and nothing is left by way of lack of coordination, even if everyone means well, and that's why he gets involved himself. And in a while from now, after completing this aerial survey, he would be traveling to Ahmedabad and having a full-fledged review meeting with the state administration, all the bureaucrats, all the ground reports with them, and of course the State Disaster Management Authority, which coordinates in these times, so that there is a proper expansive view available of whatever damage has been caused by Cyclone Tauktae in Gujarat, and hence then the relief can be announced. As I said, even before the cyclone came, Prime Minister had a meeting of the NDMA, and then he had spoken to all the chief ministers concerned. So whatever needs to be done for other states also, obviously the center would take note of it and make perhaps some announcement accordingly.
Yes, the Prime Minister there ensuring that everyone acts on time, the needful is done without any delay. And there you have the Prime Minister who's taking an aerial survey of the cyclone-affected areas in Gir Somnath, Bhavnagar and Amreli districts of Gujarat. Along with you as well, it made landfall on Monday, but the after effects can still be felt. A lot of damage that the state has witnessed, a lot of property damage, also trees that can be seen uprooted, electric poles that have been uprooted, thousands of houses and roads damaged. Prime Minister really trying to understand what the situation on ground zero as of now is. Abhishek, this also becomes increasingly challenging because just like any other state, Gujarat too is battling COVID-19. In Maharashtra also, vaccination centers had to be shut down for at least a day's time, given the current situation. And the way Gujarat is now trying to crawl back to normalcy, the whole COVID situation also makes it all the more challenging.
Well, absolutely. I mean, COVID is a challenge. It's a national challenge. It's a societal challenge. It's a governance challenge. And we have seen how Prime Minister has been involved in COVID management day-to-day basis at all levels. I mean, he is talking to his own cabinet colleagues, bureaucrats in the central government. He is talking to chief ministers every day. He's speaking to his stakeholders, including oxygen suppliers, manufacturers. He is talking to district magistrates directly, as we saw yesterday. And in that backdrop, to fly down to Gujarat also to make sure that everything is done that needs to be done in terms of making sure that the damage because of cyclone is limited.